Hello all and welcome to The Real Football, the show that we talk about the sport that you play with your feet rather than your hands. My name is Gavin Titherington, here to bring you this podcast that I am now just starting up. I've taken a lot of time to think about what I really want to do with a podcast, as I've been really adamant about creating one. And it's taken me a long time to really think about what I'm really passionate about and present that to an audience. I mean, there are a few things on the table that I could have done, but this is something that really stands out to me. And the idea of football in America and sporting in general, and how it's completely different to the way everything is run over in Europe. And I see a lot of promise and I see a lot of growth here in the United States for the beautiful game that has been dominated by the rest of the world. I see a lot of great talent coming out of the United States and traveling over to Europe. But back home, it doesn't seem to have that impact, that drive, that emotion that it has over in England. And there's a few reasons for that I've learned growing up. And growing up, my family came over and immigrated from Liverpool and brought me up supporting the Reds and supporting the club as a whole. And one of the statements that rings true over in Europe, you don't get to pick the club picks you. And that is exactly what happened for me growing up. I grew up in not the greatest of times for LFC. We grew up when I was about 10 or 11. We were really trying to battle for top four with the likes of John Joe Shelby in our midfield. Now, 10 years later, we're on top of Europe. We're on top of all of England, and we're on top of the world. But I never dropped that sense of emotion, that sense of tenacity that I want Liverpool to succeed and win. And it's really come good as of recent. It's really come good. I really want to see my team succeed, and especially in a time as unprecedented as now. And the sense of emotion has never left me. And it's been great. I absolutely have fallen in love ever since I was a young lad. I fell in love with the beautiful game. And the way I look at it, the way it was presented to me, was just completely different than any other American sport. In America, the whole sports are run completely differently than they are in Europe. So there's some big differences between European football and the sports that we have in the United States. And that one of those main differences is the way it's run. And the way it's run in the United States is that you have 4 big-time leagues that play at different times of the year. In the summer, you have baseball. Starting in October, you have hockey, you have basketball. And starting in September and ending in February, the shortest amount of time for a sport is American football. And as you go through the fall, really, there are a plethora of games on the TV. A plethora of them. You got the Patriots, for myself, coming also from a Boston sports fan's perspective. You have the Patriots playing every weekend. You have, if the Red Sox go far, you have the Red Sox playing in September, October, and delving into November if they make the World Series. And then you could also have the Bruins and Celtics playing at the same time. So that's 4 teams that I have to try to follow and try to put my undivided attention in. And some of those nights, 3 out of the 4 teams could be playing on the same night. And it's crazy, it's hectic, and it's a lot of fun. But with European football, it's basically all Europe has. I mean, yeah, there's cricket, there's rugby, there's golf. Golf is actually another one of my favorite sports to watch and play. I think it's a great sport. There's a lot of passion in golf. Not a lot of people see it because of the presumptions that it's a boring sport, but regardless, that's a topic for another day. In the United States, you have franchises. That's what they're called. The sporting teams are called franchises, especially in football. And it's just completely different the way they're run. And one team actually in the United States is the only franchise that is not for profit and completely privately owned by the fans, and that's the Green Bay Packers. And so, looking at the Packers, see, I find them a very interesting team in this regard that they're owned by the fans, and you see a lot of bandwagon fans, I hate to say it, start liking Green Bay because of the way the fans are perceiving the team. They feel like they own the team up in Green Bay. When you go up to Green Bay, Wisconsin, I don't think you're going for the cheese. I think you're going to Lambeau Field to see the Packers play on Sunday. And to me, that's one of the biggest differences between the four sports leagues, the four major leagues in the United States and Europe, is that in European football, I feel as though the fans are listened to a lot more than they are in the United States, because of the fact that most of the fans in England, per se, are born into the club. You know, their parents supported the club, their grandparents supported the club, and so on and so forth. So it's almost like they're given an advantage growing up and having some type of connection, some type of bond that cannot be broken with the club that they support. And in the United States, you don't get that. The culture is completely different here. In England, you don't pick your club. You don't say you're not born in Portsmouth supporting Southampton. That's just not feasible. The culture sucks here for sports. It sucks. It's not even comparable to the culture in England. You have people in upstate New York supporting Golden State. 2,000 miles, a 5-hour plane ride across the United States. It makes no sense. You'd think if you grow up in Buffalo, you grow up supporting the Bills. But half the fans support the Jets or the Giants. Now, it would be kind of terrible to support any of those teams, but it's like the geography just doesn't make sense of the amount of support that a team has compared to where they are. And then you have teams moving around, like the Atlanta Thrashers of the NHL moving back to Winnipeg because of the support that they had in Winnipeg, that they moved from Winnipeg to Atlanta to try to find a better market. You have St. Louis, the Rams, you have them moving back to Los Angeles just for the market. They're businesses. They don't care about the fans as much as they care about making money. And I'm not saying that as in a malicious way. It's pretty true if you really look at it from a rational point of view. What's a bigger market, St. Louis or Hollywood? It's not gonna be the be-all end-all. I mean, the Rams were in LA first and moved out to St. Louis. But an unprecedented one would be to move from Oakland to Vegas. Now, you want to talk about finding a bigger market. You move them out of Oakland, the Raiders, and they go to Vegas. That's searching for a bigger market. That's exactly what Al Davis did. Al Davis took his team from Oakland, found a beautiful piece of land, and built the Allegiant Center, Allegiant Arena, whatever they want to call it there. And in England, like the one and only time that was done, you still hear about it today. And that happened in the early 2000s with the dismantling of AFC Wimbledon and moving them to Milton Keynes, calling them NK Dons. So what did the fans of AFC Wimbledon do? They started again. They went from the 9th tier of English football, and now they're back in League 2. So there's a big difference in the way clubs are handled in England as opposed to the way they are handled in the United States. Do I think it's a bad thing that Al Davis moved his team from Oakland to Vegas? No. I might be just saying that because it didn't affect me personally, but from a business perspective, you want to maximize your profits, and the market in Oakland was clearly not up to the standard that Al Davis wanted for his franchise. So he said, all right, we're out. We're done with the Coliseum. That place is a wreck. We're moving to a brand new facility in the middle of the desert. And that's the difference. In the United States, that is acceptable. In England, it's not. So you have some type of distancing that happened between the fans of Oakland in Oakland and the incumbent fans in Vegas. They distanced themselves from Oakland. And that's exactly what happened with Wimbledon and Milton Keynes. That's one of the big differences that you have in the United States as opposed to England and abroad. The fans matter more. Maybe that was something that appealed to me at a young age. Maybe I felt wanted by the club. I mean, they weren't doing that well. But it didn't matter to me because that's what my family grew up supporting. And here, it's very difficult for a diehard sports fan to give their full time and attention to 4 teams, 5 teams, depending on how well an individual follows the MLS. That's probably the 5th big league, I would say. But it's hard to balance your time just focusing on all the other sports. It is. I mean, I've done it. Growing up as a Boston fan, I love the Red Sox. I watch every single game when they're in the postseason. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't think I've ever even attempted to watch all 162 games, nor will I ever. That would be crazy. My father actually used to tape the Red Sox games, and he was a early morning kind of guy, and he'd tape them and then watch them in the morning. Regardless, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort to follow each team. But in England, football's all they have. I mean, some people do support, the local cricket side and the local rugby teams, but not like football. That's culture. That's their whole culture. Football. And it completely trumps the sports culture in the United States. 100%. I mean, we talk about the rivalries in the different sports. I've been to numerous Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens games, and they are a blast. I love them because I do not like Montreal. Montreal does not like me. Completely mutual. And going up there in the frigid winters and seeing the Bruins lose almost every single time, it was so annoying. And it really drove me nuts because I do not like Montreal and I want to see them suffer at the hands of Boston. But it sucked. I went home, went on with my day. Boston would play 2 days later, and in a week I'd forget about the result. And so would everybody. And looking at the rivalry that the Red Sox carry with the Yankees, that's another big-time rivalry. Boston has all the big-time rivalries in the United States, in the North American sports in general. Boston has all of them. you can't refute that the Bruins and the Canadiens are the biggest rivalry in the NHL. You cannot refute that the Red Sox and Yankees are the biggest rivalry in the MLB. And some would argue that the greatest rivalry in NBA history is the Celtics and Lakers. And that's a little bit of a weird one if you don't understand that the Celtics and Lakers have been battling it out in the NBA Finals ever since the early 80s. Regardless, you play the team and you win, you celebrate for the night. You lose, you dip your head and get into the next game. But in England, it's completely different. I've experienced a lot of big games in my lifetime. I've been to Super Bowls, I've been to national championships, I've been to Stanley Cup finals. But if there was one game that I would say was my greatest experience in all of sports, the pinnacle of every single sporting event I have ever been to, it would be Liverpool versus Manchester United. Hands down. I saw New England beat LA and Atlanta in Super Bowl 53 right in front of my eyes. I saw Notre Dame get driven into the ground by Eddie Lacy in the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I've seen the Bruins lose a Stanley Cup final within 17 seconds against the Chicago Blacks. I've seen the Bruins lose the Stanley Cup final in 17 seconds against... I've seen the Bruins lose a Stanley Cup final in 17 seconds. 17 seconds against the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013. I mean, I am truly blessed to even be able to say I've been to those games. But if I had to pick one that I maybe could relive one day, that I will remember for the rest of my life, when I'm on my deathbed, if I think about one game for the rest of my life, if I'm on my deathbed tomorrow, heaven forbid, it would probably be that time I went to Anfield and watched Liverpool dismantle Manchester United 3-1, 100%. And there are so many great things about that match, and some of the things that I saw and I experienced, I could never see the United States ever living up to that expectation. So when you go to a Dolphins game in December, there are a few things I've come to expect. I've come to expect a plethora of empty seats. I've come to expect waves and waves of heat. And I've come to expect the Dolphins to lose. It's just, I mean, if you look at the records, it's pretty doggone correct. So, going to a Patriots and Dolphins game, I didn't expect much. You know, we parked our car. We walked in, not much going on. I mean, a bunch of people tailgating, getting completely wasted prior to going into the stadium. Nothing out of the ordinary in the NFL. And I didn't really talk to anybody walking into the stadium. I kind of just walked in. You know, I saw it was probably about half and half the crowd. Half Patriots fans, half Dolphins fans. That's not even a knock on the Dolphins. Just a lot of teams travel well when they come to South Florida, solely because of the weather, the beauty of the beaches. Regardless, there's about half Patriots fans, half Dolphins fans. Probably about 80% capacity on the day in the stadium. But so we're walking in. Of course, I had a Patriots jersey on. Probably had either Gronkowski or Brady on that day. And we walk into the stadium. No one's talking to me. No one's saying go Pats. No one's heckling me from the Dolphins' perspective. It was pretty peaceful. You walk in, you hear your conventional go Fins go or let's go Dolphins. You know, the conventional chants that all franchises use. The same chant, go team, go, let's go team. You know, it gets super repetitive, but at least you know if you go into a neutral crowd and you want to support a team, at least you know their chant. Regardless, so I arrived to my seat surrounded by Dolphins fans and a few Patriots fans. And during the game, people would come and go from their seats, and get drinks, get popcorn, come back and sit down. A lot of people on their phones throughout the game checking their fantasy scores. I myself would throw myself into that boat. Of course, I gotta make sure my fantasy team is performing to the way I want them to. Usually that's not the case. Not the greatest fantasy football player. Regardless, checking the stats, look up at the scoreboard. Oh, the Patriots are winning. Great. There's no difference in the crowd. Everybody's still cheering. People probably don't even know what the score is or what time the game is at. Regardless, the same chants go throughout the stadium. You got some lame wave that starts in one of the end zones and goes about a fourth of the way around the stadium and kind of just peters out. And when the Dolphins scored a touchdown, you'd hear the Fins to the left, Fins to the right. Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. They're conventional chants. You have 2 of them, 3 of them there. They're probably all about 50 years old. It sounds like it when they play over the speakers. Anyways, Patriots win. You walk out the stadium, go on with life, get in your car, turn on the radio, check about what's going on in the 4 o'clock games. Nothing out of the ordinary. Whoever wins, you still all walk out together, still all, walking in basically the same vein as you walked out. And you go home. And that's pretty much it for an NFL Sunday at the stadium. I mean, obviously, if there's a controversial play, like what happened, actually, I don't know if it was 2018 yet, but that 2018-19 season when they had the quote-unquote Miami Miracle where Miami won their Super Bowl. And I was walking out of the tunnel. I said, well, this game's kind of over. But then I stopped at the top of the stairs. I said, you know what? I'm just going to see. I just want, visual closure. I know this game is over. I can walk out peacefully. And then Kenyon Drake scores and turn my head down the stairs. I go. I'm out. Done. That was ridiculous. I'm out. I never got heckled by any fans. The Dolphins fans were a lot more positive than the Patriots fans, but we ended up winning the Super Bowl like every other year when Brady was around. Regardless, whoever wins, you walk out together and you don't really remember it. It's not going to be one of the focal points of the offseason. Did you beat Miami this year? Yes or no? Yeah. No. They beat us at home. What's new? We beat them at their house. Same thing. It's nothing out of the ordinary. But that's it. I'm not going to remember the scoreline every time we beat the Dolphins. I'm not going to remember the scoreline every time we beat the Jets. If I was a Bears fan, maybe I would care a little bit more about beating Green Bay. In my opinion, that's the biggest rivalry in American football, Green Bay and Chicago. Maybe that's something they hold on more to. But rivalries are kind of come and go. Like I said, with the Bruins and the Canadians, they play each other 4 or 5 times a year. And you really don't remember the scoreline of each one. Unless you're some diehard 11-year-old who's got nothing better to do than sit on his couch and look at stats. That was me. Regardless, you don't really remember it. You might remember the big-time play. Like, obviously, I'm going to remember Wes Welker's 99-yard touchdown catch and run. I was actually at that game. That was a Monday Night Football game in 2011, actually. That was my first Patriots game I ever went to. It was that one, actually. Down in, I think it was called Sun Life Stadium at that time. that was a pretty cool experience. Of course, there's always going to be memories every time you go to the stadium that you're always going to make. Quite frankly, every time you go to the stadium, whoever you're with, you're going to remember that. That's the most important thing, who you go with. But in terms of supporting the team, I'm not going to recollect every time the Red Sox beat the Yankees in a single season. I'm not. All right, let's flip the switch here. Let's talk about an experience going to a big-time rivalry in England. I'm going to delve in a little bit about my experience with Liverpool versus Manchester United, something I've obviously mentioned about 4 or 5 times now. So I went over to Liverpool to visit my grandparents. One of the biggest reasons why, besides that, was attending the biggest match in England, arguably. A lot of people would say the North London Derby is bigger. In my opinion, Liverpool versus Manchester United is the biggest match in England. Would I say it's the biggest match in the world now? No, I wouldn't go that far. I'd still say El Clasico has that, and it's in the grand scheme of things, the world's locker. I think El Clasico is the biggest game in all of the world. That happens every year. Of course, it doesn't matter when they play, whether it's a league game or a Copa del Rey final. It's always going to draw millions upon millions of people around the world to watch. Even going to the stadium. I mean, just looking at the demographic of who goes, you have families from Nigeria, Kazakhstan. You can name any country in the world, and there's obviously someone, not obviously. You can name any country in the world, and someone from that country has probably been to El Clasico. It's crazy. It's crazy the amount of world publicity that game brings in. And same goes for Liverpool and Manchester United. It's got that same type of draw to it. Teams that aren't necessarily in the same county, but hate each other as if they were. And it's different. It's different than a derby. It really is. I don't look at Liverpool and Everton the same way I look at Liverpool and Manchester United. I really don't. I despise Man United a lot more than I do Everton. Maybe that's just a sign of the times. I know my grandfather would rather kick Everton's butt. In my opinion, I'd rather see Manchester United falter at the hands of Liverpool. Regardless, I said I was going to talk about my time at the game. I haven't even started that yet. So I went over to see my grandparents, and I also went over to see the match. And I brought my buddy Mike. Mike, if you're watching, how you doing? He's a big United supporter. And going into that, I was a little apprehensive about the whole experience. I didn't want anybody getting hurt. That was not my goal. And I told Mike, I said, Mike, you cannot wear a Manchester United jersey to the match. I don't think that would go over well for any of us. It was just me, my grandfather, and Mike heading to the match. And we're going to do hospitality before. I said, Mike, wear something a little less revealing. So he had a pullover with a little United logo right on the breastplate or whatever. And he ended up putting a pullover on because it was a little chilly getting there. The wind was whipping off the River Mersey the whole time we were there. And so he gets his pullover. Of course, I wore my kit, my jersey under a pullover that was a Liverpool pullover. I can put a picture on that's me at the game. And so that's what I was wearing. Here's a picture of Mike. Here's a picture of myself, Mike, and my grandfather at the match. We're sitting in the Anfield Road end. So he put a little pullover on. I said, I'm gonna go full out and wear my Liverpool jacket. So I did, and so we got to the stadium. Actually, no. So what happened was we got hospitality before the match, which is a nice meal prior to entering the stadium and a couple drinks we could have. And so we did that. That took about an hour. There was a former Liverpool player there that we got to meet. I'm blanking on his name right now. But every time I've been over there to see a match, we've done the pregame hospitality, and it's been great. It's a great time, and I'm totally blessed to do that. So we have the hospitality, and it ends a couple hours before the match. So we say, hey, let's head over to the ground. So the hospitality was a couple blocks adjacent from Anfield. We're able to just walk over there, walk in with a bunch of supporters. Actually, there's a ton of support walking towards the ground, singing songs, and we pull up to the ground. They have a stage set up with a couple local bands playing, and it was a great atmosphere. The vendors were all selling Manchester United slander on t-shirts and everything. It was a great time. It was awesome. But for Mike, it probably wasn't the greatest time because every single song was slandering Man U. And of course, I'm not going to sit there and not sing. So of course I was singing and he wasn't. And the team buses pull up. The red flares started going, as you've probably seen in multiple pictures at this point. I'll throw one on the screen right now. And you see the flares going and the buses pulling in. Everybody's yelling at the buses. Everything that's coming out of everybody's mouth, it was probably explicit. The songs were going. So in the Anfield, we start heading towards the Anfield Road end is where we had our tickets. And in England, the stadiums are set up a little differently. You can't really enter one end to get to the far side of the pitch. It's especially at Anfield and a lot of grounds around England, the more traditional grounds, you have to enter the stand in which you are going to be seated in. So I can't enter the cup and go all the way around to the Anfield Road end. It doesn't have that complete 360 walk around like AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas would. So we leave the stage and the vast amount of people, and we said, let's head into the stadium early. Let's get to our seats and really soak up some of this pre-match atmosphere. And that's exactly what we did. We rounded the corner to the Anfield Road end, and when I saw the vast amount of security detail and the vast amount of police force, I said, Manchester United is here. So they started shuffling in, and each sets of fans are screaming insults to each other, hearing them back and rebuttaling, and it was a chaos, an organized type of chaos where the police were able to separate them physically, but not verbally. And I got goosebumps listening to the fans go back and forth and the songs that they were singing and the chirps that they were taking at one another. It was an unbelievable experience. So, of course, I had to jump in. I was heckling the Manchester United supporters as they were walking in. Of course, they were heckling me and the other 1,000 fans gathered around watching them get into the stadium. And I got goosebumps. It was an amazing experience walking into the stadium. So we ended up getting through the turnstile. The turnstiles are razor thin. They are probably at about the width of a normal person. Some people have to walk in sideways to get through the turnstile. So we ended up walking in. We walked up a few sets of stairs, and we finally arrived to the corridor in which the fans are permitted to, enter the stadium. So we're starting to walk towards our section, and walking past a couple sections, I said, I'm not gonna look at the ground inside the stadium yet. I want my first experience to be walking in where I need to be. So I, reluctantly looked away from looking into the stadium, and then when I arrived to my section, the rush of emotion overcame me, and I was completely mesmerized by the Anfield lights. It was unbelievable. And I could sit here for 8 hours just talking about every single notion I took in walking into that ground, and it wouldn't even encapsulate the amount of emotion I felt being in that presence and being in that limelight. It was a great experience. Unbelievable. So, and that's just a little tidbit there. So we're walking in. We took a couple pictures. I was wearing a Liverpool pullover, as you can see on the screen right now. And Mike was wearing his Manchester United jacket. And my grandfather was wearing, his normal attire, something he has always gone in the match to, or has always worn to the match. And so we get to our seats. We're just having, fair weather conversations with the people behind us. We were just discussing, shooting the what. And so nothing much is going on the pitch. They're more or less watering the pitch at this point, getting ready for match time. And the United players come out on the field. The crowd erupts. To the right of me, the support from United was going crazy, and the rest of the stadium was completely hostile towards the United players entering the field. And it was a beautiful time, because then Liverpool came out and the whole stadium erupts in a positive way, and it was amazing to hear all the songs being sung by each and every player. Oh, Andy, and then the Mo Salah, Mo Salah, Mo Salah. Brilliant. And then the players warm up, they go back into the dressing room, and they come out, and the most beautiful song on planet Earth starts playing. You'll Never Walk Alone. That's hands down probably the greatest song on the face of the earth, in my opinion. Yeah, that song means so much to me. And just at the time I was there, indescribable, the amount of emotion that was going through me. I'm starting to tear up right now. It was unbelievable. Oh man. Just to hear 50,000 sing that song. You don't find that in the United States. You don't. There's no shot. There's no shot of any it just doesn't happen here. It just doesn't. It doesn't at all. Regardless, so the beautiful You'll Never Walk Alone, everybody starts singing. Everybody's holding up their scarves, including myself. And then the match starts. And when the match starts, there's no food allowed in the section. You eat out there in the where you get the food, and you're not allowed to actually drink at the section either. So it's completely clean. I mean, the cleanup crews must love that rule, because I know in the United States, when you leave an NFL game, the seats are trashed. And that's just something that doesn't happen. You're there to watch the match. You eat before or you eat after. You want a cup of tea or a pie at halftime, you do that. Regardless. So no one's eating. Everybody's zoned in, 100% focused on the match. No one is on their phones. It doesn't happen there. It doesn't happen. You see one guy on their phone, or his or her phone, you're most likely probably going to ask what the scores are of the other match, because that's probably what they're looking at. It's crazy. Unbelievable how much attention goes in from the fans to the pitch. And so, since we're sitting at the Anfield Road end, Liverpool's attacking first, and the first goal goes in. Sadio Mane starts off the scoring for Liverpool right in front of me, and I was going crazy. I'll put the video on the screen right now. Mane scores. Everybody's going crazy. And then a few minutes later, Lingard scores for United. It was a little bit of a jammy goal. Alisson could have done a lot better on the goal if I remember correctly. But regardless, it's 1-1. Halftime comes around, and there was a lot of hope for Liverpool supporters. I don't think anybody thought the game was over. A lot of the times, this is at the time Jose Mourinho. Actually, this is the last match Jose Mourinho managed for United, the day after he was actually sacked. regardless, so a lot of Liverpool supporters knew what kind of tactics Mourinho liked to play at United. And from what I've heard, they weren't Mourinho's favorite, but he felt as though they were the best tactics he could with the team that he had. Quite frankly, that's probably true. Was to sit back and just defend the 1-goal lead. If you can get a goal on the counterattack, that's exactly what he wanted to do. And watching Liverpool and United throughout the last few years where Mourinho was managing, that's exactly what he did. So full expectation, Mourinho was going to sit back, and Klopp was not going to let him do that. So Shaqiri was the savior, and he scored the second goal for Liverpool at the cup end. We were going crazy at the Anfield Road end. I was sitting next to a guy, hugging him. I'll show the video on the screen. There he is, right next to me. Him and I were going off. We were having a great time. And one tidbit I did forget about the United goal was Mike's a very outgoing guy. Like, he's not a big fan of just sitting there and, like, not talking. That's not Mike. Mike has a big mouth. Mike has a big heart. And when big mouths and big hearts kind of collide and United score, that leads to Mike getting up and cheering. And I have never felt so many foul looks bestowed upon myself than in that moment. Everybody around us just started staring at Mike like, what's he doing in our section? It was unbelievable. It was like Mike knew exactly what he did as soon as he did it. He looks around. Oh man. So Shaqiri scores the second goal. Everybody's going crazy. Few minutes go by. Shaqiri scores the third goal, his second of the match. And everybody's screaming. Everybody's having a great time. And all of a sudden, I look at Mike. He's sitting down. And I see a hand come across and slap him right on the side of the head. Right on the side of the head. And I'm like, Mike, that sucks, but what were you expecting? And so he wasn't hurt. He wasn't hurt at all. It was something we laughed about right after the match. What an unbelievable experience to see Mike get slapped and see Manchester United also get slapped. Fortunately, we did not win the league that year, but I can say I did see the champions of Europe play. That was great. After the match, tons of songs coming throughout the ground, and all the United songs from us, Liverpool supporters, were coming out, and those are probably up there with my favorite, 100%. I love them all. I listen to them all the time, and it's a great time and a great experience to hear that in person. So we get on the bus. Actually, transportation was actually relatively quick getting out of the stadium. Not a lot of people drive over there to the match, so a lot of public transportation's key. And with the waterbed in Liverpool being so high, because they're on the River Mersey, which enters into the Atlantic Ocean, the waterbed's so high, so they don't have that underground transportation system that cities in the United States have. So a lot of the buses are able to quickly and swiftly pick up passengers and bring them to their destination. So it was pretty quick getting out of the stadium. There was no I don't have any gripes about that. And one of the funny parts is that in England, the home team always lets their fans vacate the ground first, but the away side has to sit there for an extra 20 minutes for the fans to disperse so they can let the away supporters leave without any harm done. And thinking, like, imagine being a United supporter in that moment, just having to sit there and wait for all the Liverpool supporters to happily leave. Luckily, Mike wasn't in that experience, but an amazing night. After the match, we went down to Liverpool 1. We were singing in the streets. A bunch of people were there at the bars having drinks. Everybody's having a great time. And it just shows how much one match means to a whole group of fans. I'm able to recite every single goal from that match because it was so memorable. And even 10 years ago when we beat United 4-1 at Old Trafford in 2009, I still remember Fernando Torres in that game and the onslaught we put on in the day. That was a squad. We had Torres, we had Aurelio, Fabio Aurelio, Steven Gerrard, obviously, and a lot of more household names to that time. And just, I can recollect a lot more big time matches against Manchester United, win or loss, than I can again with the Bruins and Canadiens or the Red Sox and Yankees. And that's just one of the signs that for me, the amount of passion and the amount of contempt I feel for Manchester United and in general for the teams that Liverpool play against, whether it's in the Champions League or in domestic play, I remember a lot more because of the amount of drive and amount of passion I have for the sport as well as for my club. And that's just not something I really feel, and a lot of people feel probably the same way I do that support English and European sides in comparison to United States sports. I feel as though I share a lot of views that many people like that share as well. And one of the main reasons I started this podcast was to explain and encourage people in the United States to do so as well. Not only with English football, but with their sports here. It's something we lack on the world stage, and that's very clear. And I think I've made that pretty clear throughout here. But one of the moments I realized that there was a huge difference between the way even supporters here view Liverpool as fans compared to over there, and the amount of passion and resilience that both set of fans show. And I'm going to give you an example here. So the moment I realized there was a difference was actually last summer in 2019. A friend of mine named Kenny, if you're watching, what's up? We traveled to Fenway Park in Boston where Liverpool were set to play Sevilla. And so it was the summer after we won the Champions League. This trophy was actually there. There were a few different players. Ian Rush was there. Jamie Webster was there. Jamie Webster being one of the big-time song creators for Liverpool over the last couple seasons. And there was a few other, I believe Vladimir Smitser was there at the time, and they did a lot of fun things prior to the match, but I wasn't really focused on that. I was really focused on seeing some of the young talent come through in that match. And we ended up losing. The match wasn't that, it was a preseason match. It wasn't that like memorable. We lost 2-1. But the moment I realized that there was a huge difference was pre-match. Liverpool comes out of the home team dugout at Fenway Park, and they start playing "You'll Never Walk Alone," and I'm like, all right, let's do this thing. This is my song. And so I start getting really into it, and I was so into it and so into singing that a gentleman got really upset when I didn't realize he was trying to get to a seat. And so he was in a really like malicious tone. He's like, "Excuse me, I need to get to my seat." And I'm like, whoa, hold on here. This is not right. You do not interrupt this song. You just don't do that. In England, that does not happen, I'll tell you what. And so I was flabbergasted. But then it took me a second. I'm like, they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get it at all. They don't understand the meaning of the song. He doesn't. I'm not saying that's everybody, but I mean, if you take a sample, I'm sure that there's going to be a good amount of people that will say, if they're asked, what it means, so they'll just say it's the club song. And that's fine from an American sports fan's point of view. I didn't expect him to get it. But I was upset. I was upset because he crossed right in front of me and continued to sit down and eat his nachos. And I'm like, this guy's got a Steven Gerrard jersey on from 10 years ago, and he still doesn't understand the importance of the song. I was flabbergasted. I was like, what? Like, you don't have a grip by this point? I mean, clearly by the your jersey, jerseys in England, you can really tell the time period as to when they wore them because they change so frequently. I'm like, this guy's been a fan of the club for over 10 years, and this is the way he treats You'll Never Walk Alone. I'm like, oh wow. It wasn't the same. At the bottom line, it wasn't the same. And I hope throughout this podcast I'm able to portray some type of I'm hoping to explain to you, the viewers that don't really understand, that are coming from an American sporting event type of view, the importance of football around the world. That's my main goal. That's what I want to do. Throughout this podcast, I want to start bringing on people from across the pond that are diehard fans of smaller clubs, for them to explain to a wider audience why their club means so much to them. And I think it would be awesome to bring on fans from Portsmouth, fans from Southampton, fans from Plymouth Argyle, fans from Port Vale, fans from Accrington Stanley, fans from Milton Keynes and AFC Wimbledon. And if I get two of them on at the same time, it's great content. Fans from Charlton Athletic, who've been taken over by a business mogul. And fans from Sunderland and Newcastle. And the rivalry up there. There's just so much more to English football that meets the eye in the United States. You hear about the big clubs here in the U.S. You don't hear about the rest of the 72 teams in the football leagues. You hear about the Big 20. So that's one of my goals throughout this podcast, is to show you, the fans, how important it is to people of England and the supporters of football in England, how much more important it is to them than the game itself. At the end of every episode, I want to be able to show you what it really means to be a European football fan by means of song. Whether it's just a few words or a whole song encapsulated in a few minutes, chants are one of the best things about European football, in particular England, where I can understand the language. Chants are undoubtedly the most creative aspect of being a fan in all of sport. And today is one of my favorite chants coming out of Northern Ireland. That's Will Grigg's On Fire. And the meaning behind this chant is Will Grigg is not one of the most well-known players in the world. And if you've never heard of him, I wouldn't be surprised. But he has torn up League One, and he's also torn up a little bit of the championship of English football by means of goal scoring. And the Northern Irish absolutely love him. So without further ado, Northern Ireland's Brian Scalabrini, Will Grigg's On Fire. I don't think there's a better sight than seeing thousands of fans singing the same song and cheering just as loudly as it would be if the whole stadium was cheering it. And it's just something about the camaraderie, the unification of everybody, all types of all walks of life, to come together and sing in unification for something they all love. That's something I pretty forgotten nowadays, but unbelievable. And there's a lot more to come because there are so many chants I can bring over and show you, and it'll be amazing. It'll be my favorite section of each video, and I can't wait to bring you more next week. This has been Gavin Titherington from The Real Football. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, you can obviously like and subscribe, and if you want us to take another step further, turn on those notification bells and whistles. Thank you so much again for joining me on The Real Football, and until next week, take it easy.